Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Tom Davis with Signposts. We're here today with Heath Hicks of AVCO Roofing and creator of the Catch-All System to talk about striving for that five-star experience, how to give your customers a true five-star experience that they want to tell others about. Heath has been featured in countless publications, Roofing Contractor magazine. He's been involved with Contractor Coach Pro, who's been a previous guest of ours here on the show. And most recently was featured in the podcast Limitless Roofing CEO. So we want to give a huge shout out and a big thank you to Heath for chatting with us today. But before we kind of dive into our broader topic, I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of your background, how you kind of came up with developing the Catch-All. But before that, we kind of have a little bit of a tradition here. What is the one thing you will never find on a Heath Hicks pizza?
Celery.
That is a new one. We have not heard that one before. I didn't even know that was an option on pizza.
Yeah, so. I mean, I'm pretty open to just about everything. I mean, I've lived all over the world and people eat some really weird stuff on pizzas in Asia, but celery or green onions, you will never find those on my pizza.
All right. Good to know, man. Well, walk us a bit through your background. How did you start AVCO? How did you come up with the Catch-All?
Yeah. So I was a roofing salesperson for about 7 years. And then I got the opportunity to buy the company that I was working for at the time. It was small. I was the only salesperson. Much longer story there, but bought the company about 6 years ago now. Crazy to say that, thinking time has flown by in a lot of ways. And we had some really incredible growth. And what made us stand out in the beginning, I think our growth was probably due mostly in part to our approach to the customer, how we approached our customers, how we valued our customers, how we communicated with our customers. And at that point, it was pretty easy to beat our competition just by showing up on time, doing the right thing, always doing what you said you were going to do. Really made it just stand out so much that we really started crushing all the competition around here. And we had really explosive growth as a result.
That's awesome, man. And so you're killing it on the roofing side of the house. How did you come up with the Catch-All?
Well, really kind of tackling the customer experience problem.
Yeah.
In our company and in most companies that are doing a good job, their biggest complaint after a roof is done is normally trash and debris and nails and stuff like that around the property or damage to the property. Underneath that, a lot of times it's communication. But really the number one complaint for us and most of the people that I know that are doing a good job is the trash and nails, debris, the state of the job site. A lot of times the customer's unhappy before the job's even finished. Like they haven't even given you a chance to get done with the job. They come home at lunchtime and they see all this crap all over their yard and they're like, oh my God, what's happening? And they get super uncomfortable, thinking that everything's going to be left that way or that things are going to be in a bad way by the time they're done. And so I just wanted to mitigate that problem because it had always been my number one complaint, even when I was just a salesperson.
Right.
And then when we got into the company and the company started growing, a lot of people don't realize about growth is your problems will compound, they don't get less, they get more, they get bigger. They become a bigger problem to you and inside your company. They cause more headaches. Because if you're doing, 5 roofs a week and you get 1 complaint a month, that's one thing. But if you're doing 20 roofs a week and you get 5 complaints a month, it's a much bigger deal at that point, and customers get more upset and their office staff has a harder time dealing with it. And there's more cracks for people to fall through in your system. And I wanted to just solve the problem of trash and debris so that we just didn't get those phone calls anymore, and started trying everything I could think of and everything I knew. And then I started digging around on Facebook to see what everybody else was doing and getting in different roofing groups and roofing forums and trying to figure it out just to get best practices. And in that process, I just realized if I'm going to solve this problem, I'm going to have to make something nobody else has had before. And the original intent was just to solve our problem. It wasn't to solve roofing as a whole. And then once we had a viable solution, I thought I was going to keep it proprietary. I didn't plan on sharing it. But at the end of the day, I realized my biggest problem in selling roofs is not my competition. It's really customers' perception of roofers. Mm-hmm. That's really the biggest problem for me as an individual salesperson. It's not the roofer down the street. It's people just don't usually like roofers because they've always had bad experiences.
Sure.
Similar to most home contractors, whether it's a window guy or a painter or whatever, they usually don't have great experiences with home services contractors, but then roofers are at like the bottom of that list. And so I realized if I could make a difference in the industry and raise the standard of people's installation expectation, then maybe I could sell more roofs that way. So
I like the way that you're solving for that customer experience, right? And to your point, there's always that perception with roofers in particular, right? Like, oh, they're messy, they're loud, they're there early, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
What is a proper 5-star experience then, with a roofing contractor, and what does it mean to stand out in the crowd? You mentioned some things that you were doing with AVCO, but is your kind of definition of that white glove 5-star experience the same as what the homeowner is expecting?
Well, I mean, looking at it from a homeowner perspective and considering that they usually don't expect much from us, if you want a 5-star review, you got to be there on time. You got to do the things you said you're going to do. The bill's got to be what they expect it to be, and don't F it up. That's basically how you get a 5-star review. A lot of times because people have such a low expectation of roofers, and a lot of times in shooting for that experience, which is what a lot of people are shooting for, right, they make one or two missteps, and that's how they get a 4-star or 3-star. They forget to send the email of notifying the customer that their date on the schedule changed, and that customer's wrapping their life around that install with their pets being boarded or their kids in and out of school or the party at their house or whatever it might be. And so you have one misstep, and then all of a sudden you're way low. You're 4 or 3-star. If they're super mad, if you're dealing with a Karen, it might be a 1-star and a lawsuit at that point, because of a missed email, which seems like a pretty small thing in your system. And I had a really great aha moment listening to, I believe it was How I Built This. My two favorite podcasts are How I Built This and Masters of Scale. And there was an episode with the guys from Airbnb. Talking about their brainstorm session they had that changed their whole company, where they decided to figure out what they would have to do to get a 6-star review and what they would have to do to get a 7-star review. And they started thinking about these crazy things, I think the 7-star review was like, show up at the airport with a limousine, and then there's a parade outside for you that plays a song for you when you show up at the house. And there's free dinner at the number one restaurant in town or whatever. And so of course you can't really do all those things, but in that practice, they went all the way up to 11 stars. Like, how could you get an 11-star review? And then they just they realized in that process, what are some things that they could pull out of that they could emulate, that were low cost or were easy. And so we started shooting for the best roofing experience possible, not a 5-star review, but how do we make this the best customer experience possible?
Got it.
And,
and solving for that, those 5 stars are naturally going to come, right?
Totally right. Yeah. I mean, it's okay if we miss a 7-star and we get a 6-star review, that's okay. But if you're shooting for a 5-star review and everyone's like, yeah, I mean, we're doing what's necessary, right? I mean, especially when it gets down to your production people that are tired and they're hot and they've been working for customers for 6 months now that have been grumpy because they're in a storm situation and nobody's happy about that.
Right.
Your production people can be like, well, I'm just doing what I got to do. Just to get the job done. I'm fulfilling all our promises. I'm checking all the boxes, and, you miss one thing and all of a sudden you get dinged. And so we just started elevating the customer as a priority in the process and just shooting for the best possible service. And at that point, they see you trying hard enough that when you miss something here or there, a lot of times they give you grace for that, because they're like, yeah, I know you've been busting hump to get it done right. Yeah, I'm sure it was an accident. You guys broke this bush or dropped something on the pool pump, or the crew was a day later than what I expected or whatever. They'll give you a lot of grace for that when they see you trying really hard. And so I just tried to create this culture where people would try really hard.
Nice.
And that just goes a long way with the customer, because in a construction process like that, if something's going to go wrong.
There's so many parts.
Somebody's going to forget to do the attic inspection afterwards, and there's going to be a pipe that's disconnected, or there's going to be a dent or a ding in the gutter somewhere that nobody really saw, and the customer finds it a week later or whatever. But when they know that your intent was to do your best and they can see and feel that effort, then that goes a long way. And they might call you and say, hey, this wasn't my favorite experience. But a lot of times when they're going to write that review, it'll be about the heart and the intent and the overall theme of the relationship
versus
a lot
that
of times,
one gutter dent.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you get bad reviews, it's normally 2 or 3 things that all add up. And the customer's like, well, there was this, they didn't communicate with me here. And then they didn't show up on this date. And then they called me 2 weeks after saying, hey, where's your check? You're late in paying us. And they're like, nobody even told me, nobody even gave me an invoice. What are you talking about? That kind of thing. And so it's usually a theme. And if you shoot for doing your absolute best and change all of your systems to try to do that, you're going to get a lot better outcome, because you're just, shooting high, and every once in a while you'll fall a little bit low and you'll still be at a 5-star review.
Well, that's the thing, is I was going to ask you a bit about kind of just like based on your background, how do you see yourself kind of differentiating yourself from competition, and what are those biggest challenges? But you really ran through them there a moment ago. It's communication, setting the expectation, going the extra mile, and ensuring that you're going to do what you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And then to your point, right, you've got somebody that's, as you said, bust and hump to get it done. They're overly communicating, they're setting that expectation. There might be a hiccup here or there, but that overall experience and that attention to detail and customer service has really put them above and beyond everyone else, even if there is an opportunity to be dinged because of that experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I would say, just a little side note for people that are in that, $1 million to $5 million range, that are trying to figure out how to make it into that next tier. I think what you have to realize as an owner or operator is that the people that work for you are your customers, and you need to be striving for that experience for the people that work for you. And as you do that, they'll carry on that same experience and that same commitment to the customers, because you shouldn't be, or can't really be, interacting with all your customers as you start to grow. Yeah. And you kind of need to make that transition sooner rather than later. If the business is completely built around your personal experience with your customers, your company is going to get bottlenecked at you. And then when you try to add somebody who doesn't do things the way you do it, then they're just going to be creating headaches, because they're not going to be as good at it as you, because it's not a system, it's not a process, it's not a culture, it's just you. Yeah. And so I remember the day that I took my ladder out of my truck and decided I was never going to climb a roof again without somebody with me. That was learning what I was doing, so I didn't have to do it again. Right. And the day, before that, about, I don't know, maybe 12 months before that, I stopped selling any roofs, no matter what. Didn't matter how big they were, didn't matter how awesome they were, didn't matter how much money I would have made if I kept the lead myself. I decided I was going to make sure that my guys were taken care of, because they were going to get me to the next level. Yeah. If I'd have been taking leads myself and selling roofs myself, I was going to get stuck at that size, Yeah. Yeah. And so I switched from serving customers to serving my employees the way that I wanted my employees to serve my customers. Oh, that's awesome. That culture will carry through. And you'll also notice really quick the people that don't match your culture when you really do it that way, because you'll be interacting with your employees a lot more, and you'll also be holding them a little bit more accountable. You'll be a lot more connected to them. And when somebody doesn't fit, you'll notice, because you're giving them your best and they're giving, 50% to the customer, and you can feel that and see it a lot sooner. Got it. So yeah, if you want your employees or your salespeople to really treat your customers that way, you've got to treat them that way too. Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you kind of like, what are these areas that you would address first? You mentioned you stop selling roofs, you stop climbing up there, for somebody that is in that $1 to $5 million range, to your point, that really wants to maybe step back from the business and train and empower their team to grow. Sure. Where do you start there? Right. I mean, it seems like you're really, creating this culture of professionalism and customer service really at the core of the business. Where are you starting there? I think a lot of the advice I give people in that stage is, I think firstly, as the owner, you really should master sales, because that's really kind of the engine of the business. Yeah. And you should be the best at it until you get to a size enough where you can hire someone else to take your spot in that. But you really should hang on to that as long as possible. And your admin stuff that happens inside the office, that's what you should be hiring for. And a lot of times I see owners jumping out of sales because that's where the pressure is and that's where the grind is. They jump out of that and they want to handle the stuff in the office because it's a little bit less pressing. Yeah. And I see a lot of people just plateau themselves right there because they've taken the drive and the heart and the culture out of the sales process. And I think they should stay in sales as long as possible. And then once they step out of sales, hopefully during that time, they were able to build an admin team that doesn't need their help to actually function day to day. And then they can be a visionary or a leader that's working outside the company rather than being stuck inside doing a job every day. Because then your perspective is just a little too low and you miss the things that are coming down the road. You want to have a higher perspective of where the company's going, and you've got to be outside the company really to do that.
Got it.
So okay. Yeah, that's the first thing I usually tell people is master sales until you get big enough that you can hire someone else to do it, and they're going to do it as good or better than you. And then don't dive back into the day-to-day stuff just to save yourself a $40,000 salary because you don't want to pay a production person, or you don't want to pay the people that file the invoices and do the accounting or whatever. I see them take all different kinds of positions in the company, and you're just going to bottleneck everything when you do that. So you got to get out of the way.
That's good to know, man. I hadn't heard a lot of people say focus on the sales specifically and train those people up. Obviously, you've got to be driving the business and ensuring that your growth is there. Yeah. When you're thinking about kind of some of these folks with limited budgets, right? You're talking about saving $40,000 for the admin side. Mm-hmm. You mentioned sticking on the sales side as you continue to grow before you're able to hire somebody out there. Where should somebody be investing in the business as they continue to grow, to continue that professionalism? Is it starting with something like hiring that back office admin to help with that piece so you can focus on sales? Yeah. Is it that production guy to make sure that things are running smoothly so we have that customer experience?
Totally. Yeah, I would say if you're continuing to drive the sales, you're keeping control of the pace of the growth of the company that way. When you step out of sales, if revenue drops, then your overhead gets too much and then you got to fire people or you can't grow because growth costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And if you're not the one generating the revenue and increasing the revenue, then you're not going to be able to pay for your growth really well. And you're going to kind of get stuck in that no man's land of, probably more than $1 million, but you got a couple of sales guys, you're probably going to be in the $3 to $5 million range and not be figuring out how to do it. But the initial investments I would make were like what I said would be in the office staff inside to keep the process running smooth, where there's not headaches being created all the time and balls getting dropped all the time and customers frustrated about lack of communication or, taking forever to get paid on jobs because you don't have the right people inside the office, generating the invoices for the insurance companies to pay and all that kind of stuff. That would be, number one layer of investment, I would say would just be free yourself from the day-to-day operations of the company and stay in sales, because then you can contribute to the revenue, right? And you don't have to take the commissions on that. And so that money just becomes your investment money for growth. And once you've got that system worked out where you've got, 2 to 4 people kind of running the inside of the office and you've got 2 to 4 people selling stuff, then I think it's time to start investing in, your marketing, your website, the things that are going to increase your conversion rate. The leads that you're pulling in, however you're pulling them in, you want to start with your highest impact movements or investments, I guess, to increase your conversion rate. And, we built a website. I think it was probably 2.5 years in, maybe 2 years in. We had one before that.
For AVCO specifically?
Yes.
Yeah.
But at that point is when we built the nice one, the good one with all the pages that had all the locations and all the stuff,
Yeah.
And I think that cost me like $60,000, and that was a lot. I mean, it was a lot, but it was a really cool strategy we had in the way that we built the site and the way that we did our SEO around it and put it in all the different markets that we were in, where it would look very hyper local to everybody in those markets. But yeah, over a year's time, I think I put $60,000 into it, but it still generates 90 to 100 leads a month today. And we haven't really done much to it since then. We just kind of keep it updated, but that was a really good investment. And I didn't have the money for it in year 1 and year 2, but as soon as I got it and everything else was established, I started increasing our conversion rate. So the people who would call from a yard sign had a more professional person to answer the phone that would ask all the right questions and assign the lead the right way and track whether, the salesman followed up with the lead in the first 5 minutes or first 24 hours or whatever.
Sure.
And it just increased the conversion rate. Every time I invested in something, it was because I had this flow of people coming into contact with the company, and I wanted to make sure they got handled the appropriate way. And that was website, that was phone people, it was internet advertising of several different types. Back then it was also like Angie's List and Home Advisor and stuff like that, which we don't currently use. But I think a lot of times in that you've got to find kind of the newer thing, because lead sources like that will kind of get played out over, 2 to 5 years or something,
Sure.
not that Angie's List doesn't generate anything anymore, but in our markets, it's not powerful at all anymore because there's so many contractors on it and it's just inundated.
Really?
And yeah, I think that nowadays, I think it's better to handle, I don't want to say micro, but maybe more bespoke type campaigns where you work directly with the person who's going to make the site with you, create your landing pages, help run your ad campaigns, instead of a totally do-it-yourself approach, which a lot of time people just don't have time for, or a big firm approach where you're going to spend, $10,000 a month or something and not know whether you're really getting anything out of it or not.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to find the right team that'll come alongside you and see what your needs are and see what your geography is and understand your customers and just do the right things that'll be high impact, but not cost you $1 million,
Yeah.
And there's so much more opportunity to do that now. Before, you used to have to market to basically just an entire group.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, one entire channel on TV or one entire listener base on a radio station. But now, I mean, shoot, we can advertise right to one neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just leave it there and not hit anybody else if we want to take the time to gather the data.
Yeah.
And so that stuff makes it much more approachable for smaller companies to put in, $1,000 or $2,000 a month and be able to measure their response. And I know that you guys participated in all that stuff, and I think it's the right way to go.
Yeah, that's, I really love hearing from your experience that at the core, right, you're not solving necessarily for like building the roof, right? It's solving for that customer experience to grow the business. And as the business grows, your focus changes from the external customer to, as you said, your internal customer, right? Your employees, and creating that culture so that you've got the right folks in the right groups. And then that then spreads out to your customer base. So it kind of just continues to feed and grow on itself.
Yeah.
So, I want to ask you about the catch-all, because you talked about earlier, they don't always have the best viewpoint of roofing contractors. I myself had a roofer that made quite a mess and was not too thrilled about it. Right. So when I saw your product out in the wild, I got totally hooked on it. And I'm kind of curious. You said that you were solving for your own problems, in terms of helping provide that great experience for the customer and kind of empower that contractor. What are you hearing from like your customer base? Like, are they coming back to you guys and saying like, I'm getting better reviews, or the job site's easier to clean up, right? Like it just seems like it's by implementing a solution like this, you're already elevating your game to a different level.
Right. Yeah. So I would say like crews appreciate the time that it saves on cleanup. And they appreciate the fact that it avoids a lot of chargebacks. They're not getting charged as much by the contractor for the things that they mess up. So it eases that relationship between the contractor and the subcontractor a lot of times. And if you don't use subs and it's an in-house crew, it still saves them time. None of the crews are super pumped about putting it up in the first place because they don't think it's going to work. But once they get an experience with it over a couple of weeks and they start to figure out how to use it and how to set it up quickly and how to use it creatively to solve problems, then they really start to enjoy it after that. Customers, the feedback from the customers is usually up front. It's not usually after the job, because they get an expectation because of how you presented to them and that you presented this item to them. They kind of expect that they're not going to have problems at the end of the job. Yeah. So they don't usually come back and go, "Oh man, I didn't have any problems." They normally say the feedback you get is normally in the front where they're like, "Well, I'm going to choose you because I can tell you guys are going to do your best." Yeah. And then if you do have a mess up, a lot of times it's that same principle I talked about earlier where they're like, "Well, I can tell you guys really went out of your way to try to prevent any damage." And so, yeah, I get it. Sometimes things happen, Yeah. But when they come home from lunch or they come home from work at the end of the day and there's just crap everywhere, and in their minds, blue tarps are just trash, Yeah. We think we're doing a good, and that's all I used for a long time. So I'm pointing the finger back at myself, but it doesn't look professional to them. It doesn't look purposeful. It looks haphazard and messy. And so when they come home and they see that everywhere, sometimes you as a contractor see, I did everything I could. And they see, what's all this crap everywhere? Yeah. And so when they have that mindset, then they start looking for things that you messed up. They get out of their car and they start like looking around down in the bushes and trying to figure out if you hit the fountain, because they told you not to be really careful about the fountain. And the first thing you do is walk over to the fountain, and there's one shingle and 3 nails in the fountain, and they, are upset. And when you approach it from the beginning of setting expectations that you're going to do your best and that you're using this product that most people don't use, because it does take a little time. It is a little bit more expensive than blue tarps, but it works much better. And we want to make sure you're happy. And we know that your home is your number one investment, et cetera, et cetera. Then if there is a mess up, they're like, yeah, I get it. You guys tried really hard, but stuff happens sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think one of the things too that I love, to your point, is like, yeah, it's a little bit more expensive. You're taking the time to do it on the front end. So you're setting that expectation. You're already leveling up from the professionalism. Plus they get the added benefit of having their roofing company name all over the outside of the job site with contact information.
Totally.
So are you guys getting like anecdotal feedback around like, hey, Catch-all is helping me drive more sales?
Oh, absolutely. The minute that we started using it in our company, even when they were just prototype products, even when it didn't have our company name on it, we were getting more leads because customers would walk over and be like, what is that thing? Who are these people? What are they doing?
Yeah.
I mean, it draws everyone's attention immediately. And so then after that, that's when we were like, oh, we should put our name on it. So we struggled for months to try to figure out how to get our name on it in a scalable way, and came up with the banner idea. But in the beginning, the banners were sewed permanently to the net where you couldn't move it, couldn't change it, and wasn't the best, but we worked with it for the first like version 1. And then now we have the banners that are attached by Velcro where you can move them around wherever you need to, depending on how the house is laid out. You can, move it all the way over to this side and make sure that it's on the front of the house in the perfectly visible spot, or you can put one on each side of the house, put the house on the corner, or if there's a big weird bush in the middle, you can move the banner away from that so it's more readable, et cetera. But my roofing salespeople don't want to do a job without it because they get so much attention. It's so much easier to talk to the neighbors when they're, standing on their front porch, like interested in what's going on over there. It's a lot easier to walk over there and have a conversation with them. Especially when you can start the conversation with, hey, I'm doing, your neighbor's roof over there. And, as you can see, we're doing our best to, do the best job we can and make sure that all their stuff is protected. Especially after a storm, after the first like 20 roofs go on in a neighborhood, and everybody in the neighborhood starts getting flat tires in the street, and then their neighbor gets a flat tire after they just got their roof done, and their bushes are all messed up and their flowers are all smashed. It becomes a major selling point because so many people are just ripping in and out of there so fast that it just becomes this really easy talking point that communicates value because they've already seen it. They know what it does. They just instinctually understand, oh, they're trying to catch all the trash. It's cool and it looks purposeful. That's the difference between you doing your best with tarps and plywood and then the catch-all system. Is the catch-all system looks purposeful. Yeah. The other system looks like haphazard and accidental when then the trash is landing everywhere on it. It looks like the trash is not supposed to be there. And so you put a tarp there to maybe catch the trash that's not supposed to be there. Like it fell off the roof on accident. But when it's the catch-all system, you created a space for the trash, and that's very obvious. And so, just communicates a lot of professionalism, gets a lot of attention.
I love it, man. Well, Heath, we have enjoyed having you on today. You've made a lot of great points about professionalism, setting that expectation to try to drive that 5-star review, communicating, following through, really paying attention to detail to the little things in a way that a lot of contractors aren't doing these days. And I love that you called out how I built this. I'm a huge fan of Guy Raz and that podcast. Totally. I think it's super cool. But I'll have to go back and re-listen to that component of really thinking through, 5 stars are great, but how do we get to that 6-7 star review? How do we truly go above and beyond in a way, not only for the customer, and then how do we take that and build an internal culture around our sales team, our customer support team, the production team, so that that then leaks out to that broader customer experience, man. So again, thank you so much for coming in and helping us understand how we can create that true 5-star experience.
Yeah, no problem. It's been great to be on. Thanks.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, so everybody at home, again, we were talking a bit there about the catch-all towards the end and how it can help you level up in terms of professionalism. If you want to learn more, check out thecatchall.com. Great team over there. I've heard a lot of great anecdotal feedback walking around roofing conferences. So give them a shout. And as always, if you have any questions about, healthy lead pipelines and understanding how to drive more additional reviews after the job's completed, we're always happy to talk to you here at Signpost. Give us a shout, reach out to our teams here. And as always, hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you join and follow along as we have the opportunity to continue talking with roofing pros like Heath along the way.